Hey all, how you doing today? CVMG coming back at you with a little bit more Eternal Evolution. Now, last week we went over the tier list and I analyzed it, but if we're being real, it's sort of unrealistic to expect to start with a full team of S tier units on day one, unless you're extremely lucky. So in this video, what I plan to do is go over the top 5 free-to-play characters that you can use for progression. Now, number 5 is going to be Randall. Randall is your classic assassin. He has sort of the same kit as Zed on League of Legends. You can expect him to throw out multiple copies of himself that mimic his attacks and abilities. He's got some extreme damage, and he's also able to make himself immune to damage for a little while, which really comes in clutch. Now, the reason he's number 5 is because he's crazy good in the early game, but he starts to fall off around mid, and then by the late, he's not performing as well anymore. Side note, he comes with an attack buff for your entire team, so even if he does fall off later, you could still use him on that main team to help boost whoever your new carry is going to be. Another small issue he could potentially run into is throwing a shade into the enemy backline, and then if he swaps locations with them, then now he's in the backline and he's completely susceptible to be targeted by the entire enemy team. Definitely, if you get a few copies of this guy, do not sleep on him because he would be a great start in the beginning of the game, but don't expect him to carry you through the entire game. Now, coming in at number 4 is going to be Xander. He's a really great pick. He does probably the most damage of any other free-to-play elite in the entire game. The issue being he kind of scales with attack speed, so you're going to need him to ramp up in the beginning of the match. He's more of an end game character. As he attacks, he builds attack speed up and up and up and up, and once he maxes that attack speed, he gets an attack buff, which can make him do extreme damage, especially to bosses like guild bosses or anything like that. He sort of runs into the opposite problem that Randall does. Now, for Randall, we already discussed how he falls off late game. Xander's going to be the opposite. He's going to pick up in the late game, but he's going to be kind of underwhelming in the early game. There's also going to be times whenever he just sort of falls off because this passive increases his attack speed as long as he's attacking the same character. So for guild boss, that's going to be extraordinary, but whenever he switches targets, he loses those stacks. Of course, if you level up his talent effect, he can retain half of them, and then on top of that, whenever you build up his talents, he's actually able to get 2 layers every time he uses an auto attack, but again, you're going to have to build him up a little bit to really start seeing that return. Coming in at number 3, we're going to have Taylor. Now, Taylor is here because he does extraordinary damage throughout the entire game, and they actually give you a discounted copy of him in the Wasteland. A big part of these characters being on this list is that they're free to play, and Taylor is probably one of the most free to play carries that you can actually get. Now, farmability comes with everybody in the future because whenever you do elite chapters, you can farm their shards, but the fact that they give you copies early is what really makes it matter in the early game. Obviously, there's no triple S's on this list because even if you get a triple S, it's not that easy to get some copies. Taylor, on the other hand, is completely free to play and he's going to be very helpful. Another thing about Taylor, similar to our last hero, is that he's going to rely on an end game build because he needs to crit in order to get off some of the effectiveness of his exclusive equipment. So if you want to crit consistently, you're either going to need 3 sets of crit rate sets, or you're going to need a lot of substats. And number 2 on this list is going to be Sorietta. It's probably obvious why he's up here, considering Taylor was number 3 because of his farm ability. Sorietta has a lot of ways to obtain copies as well, so he's going to be very easy to build in the early game. Now, Sorietta comes with single target abilities to help nuke down those bosses, and area of effect attacks to help bring down the waves, but those little psionic spears that rotate around them, if the enemy is in a geometric pattern to where the balls aren't hitting multiple enemies at a time, it can sometimes feel like a wasted slot, and that's why he's all the way back at number 2. He's also got some synergy within his own kit, which is really nice. He can use this Rage of the Dragons ability, which is sort of like an explosion that knocks back, and then whenever he uses his ultimate, it actually refreshes the cooldown so that he can spam it. Now, Sorietta also retains a lot of his damage in the late game, so he will find use in the early, mid, and late game, thus why he's number 2 on the list. And finally, the number 1 free-to-play carry I would recommend for Eternal Evolution is going to be Muka. Now, he is a warrior that deals pretty decent damage on his own, but the main selling point is that he summons adds onto the field that the enemies have to take care of as well. It's one thing to have a really strong character that you put all your best gear on, you put all of your talent resources into, and all of your gold into upgrading their equipment, etc., etc. But whenever the rest of your team is just sort of dead weight, then it can really feel like that one carry makes all the difference. And Muka is actually able to summon additional adds on the field that copy his stats. So all the work you put into Muka, you can expect at least 3 units on the battlefield to reap the rewards of those stats. During battle, his HP increases his attack, and his attack increases his HP, so there's no deficit of damage or tankiness with this character. And finally, just by damaging enemies, he puts debuffs on the enemies that make them take even more damage from him. Now, I think he's going to be the absolute best character to carry you through the early game because the ads on the field is going to help with a lot of situations that would end up jamming you up. And lastly, this Blood Wolf ultimate launches into an enemy dealing massive damage and provides innate lifesteal so that he can keep himself on the battlefield even longer without relying on a support. And that's why I put Muka as the #1 free-to-play carry for Eternal Evolution. And that's going to do it for my top 5 free-to-play carries on Eternal Evolution. If you have a carry that you use that you think is better, please leave in a comment why or why not. I appreciate you watching. Leave a like and sub if you enjoyed the video. But other than that, y'all, that's going to do it for me today, and I'll see y'all later. Bye.